Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the Bundesliga show brought to you by Over the Bar. Checking in tonight for another fantasy football show. We're doing this obviously ahead of match week 8 of the Bundesliga. We're doing this a little bit early just because of schedules. Welcome back, Rune, as well. Hope you've had a good international break, and we obviously, unfortunately, couldn't record last week, but we're back and we're back early as well. So plenty of time for people to get stuck in. Are you all good on your end?
Yeah, I am. Thanks. Looking forward to the big Champions League game tonight between Barcelona and Bayern. Also, just caught the most of the Leverkusen game. A lot of rotation there, which is interesting from a fantasy perspective, of course.
Yeah, indeed. Lastly, I was literally just watching it myself, and last I saw it was 1-1. I don't think I've missed any goals unless you can confirm otherwise, Rune.
Yeah, I shut down my stream 2 minutes ago, and the scoreline was 1-1 at that time, at least.
Yeah, so we're doing it a little bit in the dark, but obviously we're here for fantasy football stuff. We just wanted to get the show in this week. And naturally, I'm sure many of you are watching the football now. So if you're not watching us live, not a problem. You can catch up, obviously, subsequently. We've only really got half an hour because both me and Rune want to watch the football, and Rune, you've got a shift off anyway for working purposes. So we're on a tight schedule tonight, so we'll just whip straight into it. Do make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe. Commenting, particularly if you've got any questions over the next few days. Obviously, if you need to go anywhere for your fantasy content, go to Bulinews, either on X or online. Right, let's start with defenders as per tradition, Rune, and we've got your 3 picks on screen below. So let's walk through defenders first off.
Yeah, I've gone with Benedikt Gimper from Heidenheim as my budget defender this week. I really like Heidenheim's upcoming schedule. They're facing Hoffenheim and then taking on Kiel next week. So 2 pretty good games. And the Hoffenheim game is at home as well. And I think at 6 million, I think Gimper offers a lot of value. He's on 139 points per game on average, which is pretty solid. So I think if you need a budget player at the back, he's a quite solid option. And my mid-price pick is actually a Hoffenheim player, Valentin Gendry, who I already mentioned last week, and he did very well there, 217 points. So in his last 2 games, he's now scored more than 500 points, actually. So he's in great form. And Hoffenheim have a nice schedule as well. I think game between Heidenheim and Hoffenheim could go both ways, really. A bit difficult to predict what will happen there. But after the Heidenheim game, Hoffenheim are up against St. Pauli and Augsburg. So they have a nice run of fixtures there, and Gendry is in great form. And then finally, my premium pick is an expensive one, Maximilian Mittelstedt, who was quite surprisingly rested against Bayern. But yeah, he was back in the Champions League, of course, and should start as well here against Kiel at home. And he's on 226 points per game on average. And obviously, it's a great fixture for Stuttgart at home to be playing Kiel. We've seen other top teams really dominate them. Could be another productive game for Mittelstedt and Stuttgart at home against the newly promoted side.
Yeah, for sure. If they play anywhere near like they did last night, we could be on for a good home win. That was simply sensational. Mittelstedt played a really big part in that. Actually, I thought he was back to his best. The whole team basically. I'm sure we'll maybe talk about that in a bit, Rune. But there might be some slight rotation risk for Stuttgart, obviously for the weekend. We'll maybe come to that towards the end of the show. As obviously we're going early, and we can understand why people probably aren't joining us live, and we'll come to questions as and when we get them if they are live. But is there any other considerations that you had for this match week in terms of defenders? Maybe a couple more budget picks or any others that you really fancy that just didn't quite make your cut on these 3 selections?
thought a bit about Mitchell Weiser because he's up against Leverkusen. Obviously, he had a really good game last week, but the matchup is really tough. So that's a lot of money to spend on a player for Werder against Leverkusen. So thinking about selling him, and I think I like Bensebaini from Dortmund for this match day. He had a really good game against St. Pauli. An old fantasy favorite of mine as well from his time at Gladbach. He was doing really well fantasy wise, so he could be a good option. And yeah, otherwise I think there's a lot of good picks. If you look at Tom Rode, for example, for Union, has been in great form as well, and is a good budget option. And generally, I like Heidenheim and Hoffenheim. There's a lot of good budget picks there if you're looking for some cheap options.
Yeah, obviously Gendry is a player that you've already mentioned. He played a really good game against Stuttgart before the international break, and obviously got the goal. So that makes total sense. And there's a couple of players in those teams that you could definitely pick up. Right, we'll move on to our midfielders then, so we can kind of move through this fairly quickly. And yeah, over to you again, Rune, to talk us through your 3 picks, and starting off with a player who got a lot of praise from yours truly on the Monday show. I was really impressed by young Tom Bischoff.
Yeah, I think he's been one of the breakout stars in the Bundesliga so far this season. Has nailed down a starting spot for Hoffenheim and generally been very impressive in the middle of the park. He can do a bit of everything, I think, which is nice from a fantasy perspective. And obviously he also had a very productive game last time out fantasy-wise as well. And 5 million is just a really low price for a player with that potential and with a really nice schedule as well. Hoffenheim facing Heidenheim, St. Pauli and Augsburg in the next 3. So yeah, there's a lot of competition in midfield. When you're picking your team, it's difficult to fit in all the midfielders you want. But if you want to go with a budget pick to free up funds, for example, to buy a more expensive striker or a more expensive defender, I think Bischoff is a really good enabler this week. And another good enabler is Paul Werner from Heidenheim. He's a bit more expensive, costs 3 million more. Also thought about him. He's not been performing up to his best lately, but we saw at the start of the season what he can do. And I think at 8 million with Heidenheim's fixtures, Werner is a great option as well. And in that sort of pretty budget category in midfield. And my mid-price pick is Enzo Milio from Stuttgart. And I think he's at 11 million. I think he's quite undervalued actually, considering the role he has for Stuttgart. He's playing for a very, very good team, and he has a pretty big role. And he has 5 goals and 3 assists to his name already this season in all competitions. That's very impressive. And yeah, the Stuttgart are playing Kiel at home, as we talked about. And since he was rested last time, I'm pretty sure he'll start here. And that's actually the same thoughts I have about Mittelstedt. Players who recently got a rest, I think, are more likely to play this time than Hoeneß will probably be more inclined to rest other players. So I think he should have a good chance of starting here. And I think at 11 million, difficult to ignore this week. And then finally, my premium pick is Nadim Amiri. Hope I don't jinx him now, but last time I mentioned him on the show, he got a red card and was really disappointing. But I just had a look at his stats, and he's scored more than 200 points in every game this season, no matter who might have been playing, and even against Leipzig last time when they lost 2-0, he still got, I think it was 220 points or something like that. So yeah, he's just so incredibly consistent because of his involvement for Mainz, and it seems like he's the definition of fixture proofness at the moment. He can do well against any opponent. 13 million is quite high fee to spend on a Mainz player, but at least if you look at his numbers at the moment, he's definitely worth it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Settled in so very well at the end. Well, in the middle of last season, and has been a prominent part of Mainz. their attacking play going forwards. Interesting one about Mio, Rune. What do you reckon about penalty duty now that obviously he missed the pen? Do we think, does he switch out with Undav? Would Undav have taken it if he was on the pitch? I wonder. Mio's been fairly well trusted recently, I think, though, hasn't he?
Yeah, that's the downside. Maybe he won't take the next one. I think Demirovic is a quite good penalty taker as well. He showed that at Augsburg, nearly scored every time. So that's a potential minus. But I still think with his price tag and everything and the fixture, he should still be a very good option this week.
Yeah, no worries. I think I mean, with the fixtures that are coming up this weekend, it'd probably be silly of us not to acknowledge any buy-in players, perhaps, Rune, with the fixture that they have. And of course, we're going to have to be careful about rotation. And looking at the buy-in team that obviously about to play Barcelona, Muller starts again. Gnabry and Elise are in. We're going to see a lot of Palhinha as well because of the injury to Pavlovic. So that would be an interesting one to see your thoughts on that, Rune, in terms of a fantasy aspect. Davis seems to have picked up his form. Standard back four. Fairly locked in team you'd expect to start against Barca, but then maybe throws up the conversation about rotation for their match against Bochum at the weekend.
Yeah, that's definitely a concern with a player like Mikel Olise, for example. They just have so much quality on the bench and players who are really longing to show what they can do, like Leroy Sané and Kingsley Coman.
Yeah.
And usually Kompany doesn't say a lot about his plans at the pre-match press conferences. So, I think there's a few players I would say are 100% certain to start, like Harry Kane and Kimmich, and probably also Davies at the moment. Also think now that Musiala is not starting tonight, he might start against Bochum. Probably depends on how tonight goes, but Müller is fairly unlikely to start 3 games in a row, I think. But then of course they could move Olise to play the central attacking position and play someone else on the wing. So it's a bit, a lot of questions at the moment, and maybe after tonight's game we'll be able to give a better assessment of it all.
Yeah, indeed. Obviously, we're going early this week just because of schedules and timing stuff, and it gives plenty of people to watch the show. But naturally, it puts the challenge on you and me, mainly you, in respect to kind of predicting what we might see from a rotation point of view ahead of time. Just noticing the Leverkusen game is over, finished 1-1, so that's another good point for them on the road to qualification for the next round. Right, well, we all, in a nice timely fashion, move on to the strikers then for your picks for this week. And 2 players who played against each other last week feature in this one.
Starting off with Pieringer from Heidenheim, who I've been very impressed with so far this season. I wasn't sure if he would be up to the task of replacing Kleindienst, because those were some pretty big shoes to fill for him. But so far, at least, he's done very well. He has 3 goals and 2 assists in 7 Bundesliga games so far. So so far so good. And as I said earlier, Heidenheim have a nice run of fixtures coming up. So I think if you need a budget option up front, he's a good shout. And if you want to spend 1 million more, you could go with Thiago Thomas from Wolfsburg. Wimmer is suspended now, and Wolfsburg have a really nice run of schedule and run of fixtures as well. So I think Thomas is another good option in the budget category up front. Mid-price pick is Tim Kleindienst. Who's been he's just hit the ground running at Gladbach. 5 goals in 7 Bundesliga games, and in addition to that, he's also winning a lot of duels. So yeah, he's done very well fantasy-wise as well. He's been the 4th most productive striker fantasy-wise behind Boniface and Kane and Mamouche. So that says a lot. And Gladbach also have a few fairly good games coming up, so could see him add to his goals tally in the weeks to come.
Yeah.
And then finally, Dennis Undav. I think it makes sense to bring in Stuttgart striker, but the big question is, who should it be? I think, I looked at the stats, and of the strikers, Undav has the highest average points per game, 165, and I think he's a bit more nailed on to start than Demirovic, who could be in danger of getting rotated out for Touré, actually.
Indeed.
I have a feeling that Touré could start this week after the goal he scored in the Champions League, and he also started in the Bundesliga a few weeks ago, pretty much out of nowhere for a lot of people, and looks like he's starting to put a bit of pressure on Undav and Demirovic. So Touré is actually an interesting option as well at 10 million, but it all depends on what we'll know before the game, what Hoeneß will say, what's being reported. At the moment, I think Undav is probably the safest option up front for Stuttgart, and 13 million, that's not too bad for Undav playing at home against Kiel.
Yeah, absolutely an interesting one with El Bilal Touré, because like you say, he was thrust into it in the Hoffenheim match, wasn't he? And he just wasn't maybe employed in the right area of the pitch. He was a little bit too deep, and it clearly wasn't his strength. And then he's played a good couple of cameos in the Champions League already, because I thought he did well when he came off the bench against Madrid in the first match week. And yeah, obviously he becomes the hero very quickly overnight with his great take and finish against Juventus. What a fantastic moment that was and is for him. So I think you're very right in saying that he could be pushing. And yeah, might get in there ahead of Demirovic. I think he deserves a shot in the right position to suit his strengths for sure. Yeah, like strikers, this is always the prime category for us to kind of run through. So again, with no kind of live chat and comments, which again we understand because of the timing of which we're recording. So again, just try and cover all bases. We know the usual suspects in regards to Kane, probably not being a rotation risk. Other strikers to maybe consider, and again, I'm just looking at the RB Leipzig team, Rune. Maybe less of a rotation risk, Leipzig, it feels these days. We don't see as much the Šeško change for Poulsen, certainly versus what we did last season. They've obviously, Openda and Šeško both start, as does Simmons, as does Nusa, who seems to be operating a little bit further back right now. Any thoughts on Leipzig assets, and then any other strikers that we haven't considered yet?
Yeah, I think the Leipzig strikers are a bit too inconsistent for me at the moment. Let's wait and see how they do tonight against Liverpool. But Šeško had a really good start to the season, but then recently he's not been playing quite at that level, I think. And Openda has chipped in with some goals, but he's also had games where he's just not produced what we want to see for a player with that sort of price tag. I think Mamouche, of course, is a player to mention. His ownership is just so high that, and also his performances just speak for themselves at the moment. But yeah, with the form he's in at the moment, also a very good shout, of course. Union away, that's a bit of a tricky fixture, actually.
Yeah, it is, because they'll sit deep, won't they?
Yeah, they will, and they're looking really organized under Svensson. They're not conceding a lot of goals. But then again, with the form Mamouche is in, he could still score there. He can score against any team, as we've seen recently, against both Bayern and Leverkusen. And after the Union game, Frankfurt have Bochum at home. So at his price tag, I think he said only at 11 million. That's not a lot for Mamouche, as free scoring as he is at the moment. So he's also a good option. And then Kramaric as well. He missed a lot of chances last week for Hoffenheim. Still did quite well against Bochum, but as he said himself after the game, I could have scored 4 goals in that game.
He could.
Yes, and that's actually the truth. Could have been a lot more for him. But then on the positive side, he's just very involved for Hoffenheim, and on another day he probably would have gotten a hat trick or at least one more goal in that game. So also a very good shout at 10 million.
Yeah, absolutely. Even thoughts about Marius Bulter, to be fair, now that he's actually playing in a proper attacking role, because he looks to have settled nicely into his natural position. Right, so we just maybe got a couple of minutes still just before we get closer to 8. Maybe just to turn our focus, because we don't usually talk about them, Rune, onto goalkeepers, and if you've got any strong thoughts about changing tactic with them. The goalkeeper that I've had in all season, or at least the majority, is Labrovic. So are you thinking about changing tact, or have you seen any obviously keepers that have come back from injury? Obviously we've seen Trapp come back from injury, which means Santos has been taken out of the team. So that was one, obviously, that a couple of people were using for a few weeks. So, anything in particular that strikes you in the goalkeeping range?
Not really. To be honest, I haven't given it much thought, because I think it's so, firstly, goalkeepers don't seem to get really big holes at all. Almost only if they save a penalty or they're having a truly extraordinary game where they just make a lot of saves. It's really difficult to get a really big amount of points from a goalkeeper, I think. So and at the same time, it's so difficult to predict who will do well. I think if you look at their overall points, the goalkeepers' overall points, just doesn't make sense to invest too much in that position, and that's why, for now at least, I think I'll just go with Labrovic. Not really anyone else that's convincing me enough who's more expensive, that they're worth those extra million.
Yeah, no, unless you want to completely gamble on the penalty saving specialist that is Ollie Baumann.
That's right.
I presume he'd be way too expensive, really, for people's funds.
Yeah, he's at 11 million. I just had a look on my phone here, and I think that's way too much, because even I know they still conceded 2 goals, but he saved the penalty, and he's still only on 259 points. I mean, that's solid enough, but but what can you do more as a goalkeeper than to save a penalty? It's just it's tough for the goalkeepers to really pick up a lot of points from a single game, and that's why I would look at other options.
Exactly that. Grand. So that very much covers us for the show. We'll wrap up now. As I say, in terms of wrapping up, just the usual little bit. So please do give a thumbs up to the show. In terms of comments, get them in as all through the next few days. You've got 48 hours basically to make the most of this. Obviously before the Friday match comes in. We'll post plenty about it over the next few days, and me and Rune will try and cover the comments and the questions as and when they come in. Do make sure that you keep asking, even if you haven't been able to watch us live on this occasion. In usual circumstances, throughout the rest of this next few months and the rest of the season, we'll probably stick in our usual Friday morning slot, as that seems to suit a lot of people and indeed our schedules right now. But we thought we'd go early this week just because of a few other bits and bobs. But do make sure you follow us on X, aka Twitter, at Over the Bar FB and Village Footy. Of course, head to Bulinews.com as well for all that fantasy football content. Also, as a reminder, we're on Instagram in case you want to absorb us that way. And then, that very much covers us for this evening. So hope you enjoy all the footy that's coming your way in the next few days. And indeed, good luck to all you fantasy football players for the next match week 8. Hopefully it's a good one for you all. Thank you, Rune, and we'll catch you next time. Cheers all.